Welcome, everyone, to the Virginia's for Sports podcast. If you're watching us now, thank you. Found us on our YouTube channel. Don't be afraid to hit that subscribe button. I promise it's free. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at VA is for Sports. And we have a special guest for everyone tonight. If you turned on a radio to listen to sports in the fall or the winter or even in the early spring, anytime, heck, even in the summertime, if any time from 1983 to now, you probably heard this man's voice. I got goosebumps just knowing I get to talk to him tonight. He's a proud Syracuse graduate. He has been the voice of the Richmond Spiders for 40 years or more, 40 years plus, even though he's only 42. So that's amazing. He's a 2019 Bob Vitrone Media Award winner. He is the one and only Bob Black. Thank you so much for being on tonight.
Fellas, this is great. This is an honor. I'm excited about it. So fire away. You guys have that positive vibe, and I'm all about that when it comes to Richmond and Virginia sports. Let's do it.
Awesome. Bob, how did you end up in Richmond after you graduated a couple years earlier from Syracuse? How did you end up here?
Yeah, so when I left Syracuse, I took a job with my college roommate in Portland, Maine. Which is where I really learned to hate cold and snow. Not so much at Syracuse, because as a college kid, you just deal with it and go about your business and play in the snow and have fun. But when you get out in the real world, ice and snow, particularly at 5 o'clock in the morning when you're doing morning drive radio, it's a real pain in the butt. So that's where I learned how to hate the cold and hate the snow, is in Portland, Maine. And I took this job with my buddy to do high school football games. But I also had to cover like city council meetings and fires downtown. And I hated that part of it, not to mention the cold. And an opportunity came along in the spring, pretty close to the start of the baseball season, to be a broadcaster for the Richmond Braves, the old AAA team that was here for many, many years in Richmond, the Atlanta Braves top farm team. And I jumped at that opportunity because I had done minor league baseball in Syracuse and loved it. It was really a passion. So when that opportunity came along, I came down here to do the Richmond Braves, which I did for a little more than a decade. And during the course of that broadcast opportunity, the University of Richmond opportunity came along and kind of tied all together. In fact, I'll tell you, at one point I was doing minor league baseball, college football, college basketball. That was like the job of all time for a young single guy just getting started in the broadcast world. So it was a lot of fun.
Well, and back when you came here, the 80s, we saw a lot of big names come through Richmond, end up playing for a long time in Atlanta. That must have been awesome 11 years.
Yeah, it wasn't quite some of the guys that you may think of. I was just before the Chipper Jones era in Richmond, but I was here for the very short period of time that Tom Glavine was here and John Smoltz was here and David Justice was here. They didn't last too long, and once they were gone, you knew they weren't coming back, and obviously they didn't. So you're right. There were some really good players that came through Richmond during my time.
Yeah, that's awesome. You've been deeply involved in sports, I imagine, your entire life, certainly in your adult life. What is it about sports in general or specifically that keeps you in all these games so connected to them?
Well, I guess because I couldn't play sports, I wanted to do something in sports, and I guess I found out that I could talk sports. So without sounding too cliche-ish, it's certainly the people that you meet both in the broadcast booth and in the locker rooms and in the dugouts. But I also think it's the not knowing what the script is going to be on the next night. This is not like going to the movies where you know what the outcome is going to be or something like that. You just don't know what you're going to do or what you're going to see on a given night and at a given game. And I think that is kind of what keeps me going, that on the back end. And then the preparation of learning about, different people, different places, different storylines. I still love that. I still love the research part of it, the game prep, before you're actually on the air. So I think all of that kind of combines into, my passion, my love for sports broadcasting.
I think that's the best answer anybody's ever given for why they do what they do. I mean, we're recorded, right? People go check the tapes. That's the best answer we've had so far.
And I still love it. I mean,
Yeah.
after, as you said, after 40 plus, it is a little bit more than 40 years. I still love doing all of that. And I really believe there hasn't been a game that I've gone to where I actually said, oh, I just absolutely don't want to be here. You know, there are some that you're a little more excited about than others, and cities that you're more excited about being in than others. But I don't think I've ever woke up on a game day and just flat out said, oh, I don't want to do this game today. So when that changes, I guess maybe my tune will change as well.
Well, you can't tell that you don't enjoy your job. We can tell you enjoy it just by listening to you call the Spider Games. So I'm going to jump right into the fun. All right. You started with Richmond basketball right as their the Dick Tarrant-led Spiders' first big upset of the Richmond era against Auburn and Charles Barkley. We could get into that, but I want to hear about the first 15 seed to beat a 2 seed, because not only was that the first time that happened, but it was against your alma mater. Were there any mixed feelings? What do you remember about that night? Tell us all about it.
Yeah. So that was, as you might imagine, the most popular question asked of me all week long, leading up to that game was, who are you rooting for? Where are your emotions? Which side do your loyalties lie on? For me, guys, that answer was really easy. I mean, for 2 reasons. I work for the Richmond Spiders, number one. And number two, I think there's a sense of, you gain some, I don't know if legitimacy is the word, but for people at your alma mater to see you at a school and a program that is being successful, that is doing things the right way, that you're a small part of, I think there's something to that. And then, and then the selfish part of it is, if Richmond had lost that game, I'd have been home sitting on my couch watching the rest of the tournament, just like you and everybody else. If Richmond won that game, I had a courtside seat for the next game. So for that selfish reason alone, I obviously wanted Richmond to win. And then there's the historical perspective of it that you just alluded to, that, you're part of history. You're the first 15 to ever beat a 2. They'll never take that away from us, even though it has subsequently happened before. And now, obviously, we've seen a 16 beat a 1 as well. So for all of those reasons, and the game was at College Park, Maryland. There was the University of Maryland, and it became, probably the greatest home game ever for the University of Richmond Spiders because of the number of people in the building. And, when an underdog starts knocking off a favorite team and the game gets close and it's later in the game, the whole building, minus that pocket of 50 Syracuse fans or whatever it was rooting for Richmond. So it was really a tremendous environment and a memory of a lifetime, to knock off the alma mater.
Oh, I love
it. Kevin just talked about 2 different big upsets. I mean, they're like 7 or 8 really significant upsets. I mean, breaking Kansas's 52 or 58 game home win streak. And they were a top 10 team at the time. Just unbelievable upsets. And it's across a handful of coaches too. Is there something specific about University of Richmond's basketball program that has led to these significant upsets?
A couple things. First of all, the Kansas game is probably my favorite game. Maybe I should qualify that. My favorite regular season game of all time. Being there, felt like a basketball geeky kid. We go in the night before for a short practice shoot around, sneaking through the whole building to check out every nook and cranny in there. The Naismith Memorial Museum is in there. All of that. So, and then the way the game played out with one of my favorite players of all time, Tony Dobbins, who was known for his defense, 2-time Atlantic 10 Defensive Player of the Year, makes the game-winning shot with like 2 seconds to go, which is one of my favorite calls. I don't know how good it was, but it was one of my favorite calls. And I just spoke with him actually not too long ago, and we were reminiscing about that. And it kind of gave me chills all over again. So that game was way up there on my list of favorites. And as to why Richmond has been successful, I think for the most part, the coaches we've had understand the alignment with the university, the culture, the type of player that you have to recruit to be successful at Richmond, both on the basketball court and in the classroom. So I do think the university has done a really good job of giving the basketball program, which has earned it, the resources and the support that they've needed to be successful, whether we were in the old CAA or whether we're now in the Atlantic 10. So I think it's a combination of all those things, but I definitely think it starts with the head coach who understands the culture and the environment and the alignment at the University of Richmond.
Yeah, and every coach has, I think. Yeah, we won't get into the details there, but yeah.
I always credit Richmond Gonzaga for bringing the mid-major into the consciousness of the top 25 voters. Maybe you're going to get a higher seed, maybe you're going to get an at-large bid. It started happening, I think, when Richmond started knocking people off. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit now because I want to get your take on. I don't know if everybody in this area realizes, and maybe they do, how close we came to having a Richmond VCU Elite Eight game to see who goes to the Final Four. It was blowing our mind that it was about to happen. And then VCU went on and did what they did. How was the vibe in the city for you at that time? Because it was a tremendous time for Richmond sports, Richmond being VCU and University of Richmond.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we had obviously never seen before, that both of us were sharing the spotlight. Both of us were on the national scene. Both of us had different, stories to tell that season, as successful as we were, to win an Atlantic 10 championship, to be the automatic berth. And then for VCU, you've also got to remember that they barely got into the tournament. They were a first four team. Yeah. They had to go through Dayton and win there before they went on the remarkable run that they eventually went on. Was amazing for them. Now, I will give you the twinge of, I don't know if jealousy is the right word or not, but obviously that's one of the greatest seasons in Richmond basketball history, to get to the Sweet 16, to win the A-10 championship. And yet, whenever we bring it up in this town, VCU is able to, do us just a little bit better, by going to the Final Four in the same year. Yeah, I know. I got it. Believe me.
Let's throw that down.
If you want me to go in the other room, pull out of my closet, I've got the T-shirt that says 2011, NCAA tournament, Final Four, all that. And then on the back, of course, it shows that VCU went to the Final Four and Richmond only went to the Sweet 16. I don't mean only, because it was a great accomplishment, but you get my point. We're kind of sharing the stage, and they did it one step better, at the end of the run with their Final Four appearance. But it was a great march in the city of Richmond for any kind of basketball fan, and we probably made some new basketball fans because of the success of both the Spiders and the Rams.
No,
right, switching sports.
Follow up?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. So, and Paul, I hope I don't steal your question, but we're talking about VCU and Richmond. How has this rivalry? I mean, tell us about this rivalry from your perspective, because it's a big rivalry. When I think of rivalries, and of course I live here, I think VCU, Richmond, Virginia Tech, right? UNC, Duke down the road, but those are rivalries to me. What has it meant to you?
I think it's great for the city. It's great for both teams. I think we can look forward to at least twice a year, having those kind of intense games. We now get national television for both of them. That's pretty automatic every year. Look, they've won more games than Richmond has in that rivalry. But I think, and this is from the Spider perspective, you can kind of look at it and say there were more dramatic wins by Richmond in this series. And maybe that's because VCU was favored more often than Richmond. I don't really know, but it seems like the really tight, really close games, the ones that went into overtime, of course, these are the ones that I'm going to remember more than anything. The Spiders have come out on top. So I love the interaction between both of them. I would say for the most part, over all these years, we get along great off of the court, want to beat each other's brains out on the court. But off the court, I think there's a pretty professional, friendly relationship between the two schools, the players, the coaches, administrators. I don't think, like back in the old day when I first started, I think the players played against each other more. Summertime, pickup, that kind of thing. And I don't see that as much anymore. Each of us kind of stay to our own campuses, but that also created a little bit more of the rivalry back in the day.
Well, Kevin, you did steal one of my questions, but it's all good. Because Kevin and I grew up here in Richmond, VCU, U of R, and Virginia Union, just three really, really good magnets for basketball talent, and we got to see it play out on the courts. And not every season's a great season for all three schools, but all of them have had a lot of really good teams, and they've been fun to follow. And it's made Richmond kind of a destination for basketball fans.
Yeah, I'm glad you added Virginia Union in there, because I mean, what Dave Robbins, the Hall of Fame coach, did with that program and some of their star players that went on to Hall of Fame careers, actually in the NBA. They certainly had a share of the spotlight back in those Dave Robbins days, for sure.
Absolutely. So I'm going to switch to football real quickly.
Yes.
U of R won a national championship in football. I never thought I would say those words. That team went on an amazing run. Do you have a couple of fond memories from that season?
Well, that phrase right there might be my favorite memory of the whole thing, because when we were down in Chattanooga, the national championship game was played in Chattanooga back then, and there were spiders everywhere. And as we walked around the parking lots, pregame, tailgate, in the stadium when fans were just coming in, and the atmosphere was building from so many Spider alums, particularly older alums, older football alums. And I just heard that phrase over and over again. I never thought I'd see this day. I never thought I'd see this day. And I think that kind of just tells you the magnitude of what that meant to so many people. And I'll be honest with you, fellas, by the time we got to the national championship game, because of the way we won the semifinal game at Northern Iowa, to me, this is pompous as can be, it was a foregone conclusion that we were going to win that game. I know Montana was favored. They were one of they won championships, all of that. But just by the karma and the chemistry that this Richmond team had, particularly what they did through the playoffs to beat both Appalachian State and Montana along the way, by the time we got to that championship game, I've never been more confident that a team I was broadcasting was going to win a game than that one.
Love it.
Yeah, so VCU got their little Final Four. Who cares?
Their little
we won the
Final
national
Four.
championship.
It's more than a little Final Four, but go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm kidding. No, it's been incredible. So I was going to ask you about football, and now the question eluded me. But so Mike London still coaches around in the state, I believe. What did he mean to that football team? Yep. What did he mean to that football team, and how was he able to drive them to such success when it's never been done before? And now Richmond's continued to be somewhat of a powerhouse since him.
Yeah, so his defensive coordinator on that national championship team, Russ Huseman, is now our head coach. He's going into his 8th year this season, and now he's enjoying tremendous success. And he was great that season. We won the national championship. And in fact, the day after we won the national championship, he stayed in Chattanooga, interviewed for, and got the head coaching job at Tennessee Chattanooga, of which he is a graduate. So that was quite a Cinderella story that all worked out. So he coached for Mike as his defensive coordinator when Coach London was Richmond's head coach. And of course, Mike's a Richmond grad as well. So, he bleeds Spider red and blue, even though he's wearing green and gold now and doing a fine job at William & Mary. But that was part of his marketing pitch and his recruiting pitch was, I walked in your shoes. I walked in your shoes on this campus. I walked in your spikes. I know what practice was like here I get it. I know what you're going through here at Richmond. And I think that motivation that year in 2008 was particularly important to that team. And then he became a little bit more of the CEO of that program. He inherited a great team. Now, still, you got to win. You got to coach right. You got to put people in the right places. But he did have a veteran team, a lot of guys who returned from a semifinal team the year before under Dave Clawson, who obviously has gone on to great success at Wake Forest. But he managed that team just brilliantly and let his coaches do their coaching and put players in the right spots to win games. And once that team got on a roll, and it almost didn't happen, but once that team did get on a roll, it was like a freight train, and it wasn't going to be stopped.
I'm curious about what you do day to day when you're not doing a 2-hour radio show or you're not doing play-by-play. Your title, Director of Broadcast and News Content, implies back to your Portland, Maine days, that you may be doing more than sports, but my guess is all of that news content is sports only. Is that fair?
That's correct. And when that position was established, I oversaw our public relations department. Probably the wrong person at the wrong time. No, I'm kidding. Which was great for me because it put me on the other side of this thing, right? I'd been in the media all along, whether it was play-by-play or just sports reporting or sports talk show. I've done TV sports as well. And as we've talked about, I had that very short, not very likable stint covering news. Never did that again. So that position was created to oversee what we do with broadcast, everything from production to hiring crews to hiring talent for other sporting events that we have, and then input basically with our website, basically with richmondspiders.com. And then I since turned over the public relations position to people way more capable of that than me, but was able to stay on in the position I am. And now we kind of work hand in hand. So I get to see it from a different perspective. So I still do behind the scenes work. Most of it is TV and radio related, our contracts, our talent, that kind of thing. Do some other things, kind of those old duties as assumed and assigned within an athletic department that I can work on. I'm heavily involved with our Hall of Fame and our Hall of Fame committee. Handle most of our speaking engagements with our alumni, and we go to different cities and do speaking engagements. So those are some of the things that I do beyond the broadcasts, which, this is no surprise. Still the best thing I do. Most fun I have is still doing the broadcasts.
So
that just sounded like a really full day. I don't know. I didn't think I was working that hard anymore, but that sounds like I put in a full day now.
Oh man, we got to check on that. So the sports huddle, right? Aside from, I guess you're doing everything University of Richmond, then you get on this sports huddle and you have to deal. How do you deal with all the Washington Commanders stuff being from Philly? I mean, because you're a Philly guy, right? So yeah. How do you stomach that?
Yeah. The stomach part isn't that bad. Of course, they haven't been very good for a while now, so that makes it a little bit easier. There was also a time when we carried their games on our station, and that made it even a little more dicey because obviously there's a higher level relationship there when you're carrying the team's games. When they had training camp in Richmond, I loved that. I always found that really enjoyable. We were out there, every day or 5 days a week, whatever it may have been. The fans were great out there. We were set up in a tent right up on the hill, could watch all the practices, and they brought us players for interviews. And remember, this is summertime. It's preseason. They haven't lost a game yet. Everybody's feeling pretty good. So they gave great answers. They gave great interviews. And I actually miss not having training, maybe not for 3 straight weeks, but I actually miss having training camp here. I really enjoyed that. And I'd been to Commanders, then Redskins training camps in the old days when they weren't in Richmond, even before their Richmond time. And I always kind of enjoyed that. So I think to answer your question, at least on the air and doing interviews, I can draw that line in the sand and be that, quote unquote, professional journalist until Sunday at 1:00 comes around. And then I bleed eagle green and go Birds.
Yeah, it's hard to take Philly out of the Philly guy, right?
Yeah, it is. And I don't want that to happen either, even though I haven't lived there in, 40 years. I'm a Philly guy through and through.
Well, it's a good segue to my next question. What has kept you in Richmond for 40 years?
Yeah, so there's 2 routes that I think you can take in this business. Neither one of them are 100% right or 100% wrong. Richmond can be a stepping stone market, right? I mean, you guys know that. It's a good, solid, but mid-sized market. And a lot of folks stay here for a few years and they move on to the next level and they move on to the next level and they move as high up as they can possibly get. And who knows where they wind up, which is great. Maybe at a network or maybe at ESPN or maybe for a major league team or NFL team. And I think that's great. And I tried that a little bit. I won't lie to you. There were some opportunities. I hated doing it. The old submit your resume and tape deal to move on. And I did that when I first got here to Richmond. Nothing really panned out. And then I started getting more opportunities in Richmond. And that's the other route that you can take, is to stay in one place, but do a lot of different things in that one place. And that's kind of what's kept me here to a degree, whether it was baseball play-by-play, then it became basketball and football play-by-play, then it became radio talk show, then it became anchoring and reporting TV sports, then it became a public relations position at Richmond. So I've just loved doing all those different jobs, having all those different roles, but doing it in the same city. And I've just obviously come to love Richmond. Family, was raised here in Richmond. My kids, one of whom is still here in Richmond, the other of whom is in the business not with me, but in the same television radio business, although not here in Richmond. So that's kind of the route that I enjoyed. I loved it here. I love the climate, the changing seasons, a couple hours from the beach, a couple hours from the nation's capital. I'm sounding like a spokesperson for the Chamber of Commerce here, but it really is kind of true. So I took that route, and I haven't regretted it at all. I've absolutely loved it, and obviously, whenever that day comes, I will finish my career here in Richmond.
Yeah, I mean, just real quickly, Kevin, Bob, to be the voice of something is a pretty awesome place to land, and you've been able to live it for your entire adult life. It's almost. I mean, It's amazing.
So those positions I've come to learn are a valued commodity, right? Play-by-play of, mid-major to major college sports programs, basketball, football, particularly. There's a list out there. And you're right. I've been doing this for 42 years now. There's a list out there that's titled Old Guy Radio Announcers. And it lists like the top 50 of us with our, how long we've been. I think it primarily is basketball. And I'm not hardly even in the top 25 of that list. So I'm on that. Don't get me wrong. I'm on that list. But there are at least 25 guys who are at this position longer than I have, which to me is absolutely phenomenal. In fact, in this state and the Atlantic 10 Conference, I think there are 4 or 5 of us that are right there at the same 40, 42, 43 year threshold. So they're valuable positions. I respect that. Never take advantage of that pretty much every day. And I'm very thankful they've let me stick around all these years.
That's awesome. Tell us how much fun it was to follow your son in that Roanoke tournament run a few years back, because you were dad, right? You didn't have to do play-by-play or do anything else. How much fun was that?
Yeah, you're digging up some of the really good stuff now. So I appreciate that. I do. It was phenomenal. It kind of came out of nowhere. He was a catcher for the Roanoke baseball team. And when he got recruited to play there, they had a new coach. They had never been very good in baseball, and they were giving him the opportunity with some improvements and resources. And he went out recruiting for the best players he could get. And for the first 3 years, it was hard. They were a 500, maybe a little bit better. It was a big deal if they just made the ODAC tournament, let alone win it. And so, because that hadn't happened much, and they were able to do that. And then his senior year, they kind of caught lightning in a bottle, to be honest with you. They had to win the ODAC. They had to win on the last day of the regular season to even get into the ODAC tournament. And then they won that. And then they won the regional tournament. And then they got a berth into the Division III World Series in Appleton, Wisconsin, which is a long way away, fellas, in case you haven't looked at a map or a GPS lately, especially when you drive all the way to Appleton, Wisconsin, which we did.
Wow.
But it was worth it. It was just a phenomenal experience and a phenomenal run. And he was fortunate enough to be a part of that. And they're starting everyday catcher. And I will say this, though, it's tough being just a parent. I mean, I kind of now know why I broadcast games, because at least you have a release. You really don't affect the outcome of a game when you're broadcasting it, but you're in the middle of it. You're right there. You're part of it. You're working. And never did I experience the nerves and anxiety that I did when I was just parent, just dad, while he was playing those games, particularly, obviously, that postseason run. It was really special. In fact, I was just with him over the weekend. He just got married, actually. So that's how you tell time flies. But I said to him and a couple of his college teammates who were at the wedding, I'm like, you guys are getting close to your 10-year reunion, It's going pretty quickly. So they're a couple of years away from that. But I hope they do that, because that was a really special group of guys.
That's awesome.
Bob, we're going to ask two more questions. Kevin's going to end on a positive note. I want to ask about your relationship with Greg Beckwith. We lost him recently. He was your broadcast partner for quite some time. I know his loss is still fresh for you, but if you could just talk about Greg.
Yeah, 21 years as a broadcast team, but 40 years of relationship and friendship. I called Greg's games. My first year, he was a sophomore at Richmond. He was on that team that beat Auburn and got to the NCAA tournament, and we've really known each other since then. Probably my closest friend. As it turned, we would text and call, almost every day. I still want to do that. Every day that something happens in the college basketball world, it's the crazy NIL or transfer portal. We always talk about. I just want to pick up that phone and text him, and can't do that now. And that's really hard. And kind of what I learned is just how many people's lives he so positively touched in everything he did. I talked about, I did a lot of different things. He did a lot of different things as well. He's a great dad, a great husband, great friend. We traveled together on the road. We roomed together. I mean, here are two guys at 60 years old, or 60 plus in my case, and we're rooming together during basketball season. We're loving it. Like, there were certain times when one of us wasn't there, or, we got separate rooms, which was a great thing, but we were kind of like, where are you? Let's go, have dinner. Let's get a drink, whatever it may be. So the connection there was, I thought inseparable, and the unexpected nature when that happens. And I know it happens to others. It's just so daunting and so devastating. It's hard to get through, but he was such a positive guy that I've tried to stay that way, even still hurting over his loss and moving on, which I know he would want us to do. And I had a friend of mine, former Richmond player as well. And we were having lunch one day, and he had a tragedy in his life. He'd lost a child, and he said, "How are you doing?" And I go, "Well, I'm actually doing okay." And I hesitated to say that because you almost feel guilty. And he said, "Bob, I've been through it. At some point, you're going to have good days, and don't feel bad about those good days. You're still going to have a lot of really bad days, but don't feel bad about the good days." And I'm trying to live by that. I've stayed in very close touch with his wife, who is unbelievably strong, tremendous person, and his son and daughter as well. His daughter actually works for the NBA. So there's a connection there, but it's just been a huge void and a huge loss. And I know it's going to all resurface and really be a tough emotional, season when we get to it in November as well. And he won't be there.
Yeah. Really sorry for your loss, Bob.
Thanks, fellas.
Absolutely. And Bob, I'll say this, your fondness for each other came through listening to the two of you do basketball games. And that's not always the case, as you know, with broadcast teams. So that's awesome to hear. Thank you for sharing that. I am going to end on a high note, but I'm going to say this. We used to do something called a Mount Rushmore, and then we had morphs all over the place, how we end these interviews. I kind of do want to go back to a Mount Rushmore because you are the face or the voice of the Richmond Spiders. And I know when I ask you this question, there's probably going to be, you might feel like, I don't want to leave this person out. But I want you to tell me the top four most dynamic athletic people that you met and have broadcast for with Richmond. It could be football, basketball. It can be baseball. If you want to bring Sean Casey into the mix, whatever it is, it's fine. But by the way, that guy's great. But yeah. I'd love to hear your top four people that made an impact on you at the University of Richmond.
So Richmond Spiders, is that what you're talking?
Absolutely.
Just players and coaches. I need some qualifications here to try and get it down to four. Well, Casey would be on that list. Brian Jordan would be on that list, who obviously played two sports, played in the NFL and Major League Baseball. John Beilein would be on that list. Our former head coach obviously went on to two Final Fours. at Michigan. So I do think he would be on that list. And I'd almost be remiss not to put Greg Beckwith on that list, to be honest with you, as both a player and then my partner. So that would be my first four. It would be a lot deeper than that. I mean, as you said, I'm leaving off, some pretty good names here. The Johnny Newmans of the world and the Jacob Gilliards of the world, and Kyle Laletta, our former football quarterback, who was just a tremendous guy. You're right. I'm leaving guys off of this thing now that are going to get mad at me for leaving them off. So, but instinctively, those are probably
there's been tremendous.
Using your definition, that's probably the first four names that would come to mind for me, I guess.
I love it.
Well, Bob, thank you so much for doing
All
this.
of those are awesome.
It's really weird for Kevin and me because we've heard your voice for probably thousands of hours.
Yeah.
And to talk to you.
There is a mute button, guys. There is a mute button. You can stop listening to this voice. It works. Trust me.
Nope. Not doing that, Bob.
Well, I hope not for a little while longer, to be honest with you. So I want to keep doing conversations like this. So feel free to invite me back anytime you'd like.
No, absolutely.
Awesome.
I appreciate you saying that because we'll do that for sure.
Good.
Thanks, Bob.
Awesome.
You got it, guys.